All right, thank you. Thanks. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. I kind of want to introduce myself, kind of where I've been. I'm a local, born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. So I went to Flowing Wells High over there in that side of town, lived behind Jacobs Park there. So local guy, started some of my journey. I want to kind of been all over. It's been kind of interesting. I ended up doing some Pima College work, and then I ended up at Utah State University, where I was very interested in behavior, and I started getting into psychology and started trying to understand. It's like, why do people do what they do, right? And I've always liked working with kids and babysitting and doing different things too. And so I actually started getting involved with a physiologist, which was kind of interesting, and he started getting me into doing rat and pigeon studies with methylphenidate. And I was like, what? This is pretty interesting. So I started going down that path too. And so, but I kept thinking, well, if kids aren't in the homes, where are they at? Well, they're in schools, right? So I jumped into the school psychology program, the master's program at Utah State University, and so really enjoyed that. Started working in the clinic there as well. Ended up from Utah State going and doing an internship. I was presenting some research, and there were some professors from Columbia University Teachers College, and they said, hey, you interested in an internship? So I said, yes, that would be amazing. And so I moved to New York. And so there I spent a year and a half. I didn't really understand what the school was, and it was a giant school for kids with autism. I had no idea about autism, and I didn't understand. I knew some basic behavioral principles because I was working with, people, and then rats and pigeons and all sorts of stuff, and it was kind of interesting. But what they were doing in the school, so my job at my school psych internship was to get everybody's IEPs together, get all the testing done, right, everything, and run some of the meetings here and there. So it was always interesting. I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? They're nonverbal, and so it was challenging. I learned a lot. But what I noticed in the classroom is like, wow, what they're doing is working. And I was like, what is this called? And it's applied behavior analysis, so it's ABA. And so I started working with families, and so I served a lot of the families, and I would do parent training in the evenings with the Spanish-speaking families around the South Bronx and around Yonkers and different areas of Westchester County. So I started learning and working with parents in the homes, and I really enjoyed all of that as well. So from there, I ended up getting into the PhD program in school psychology at the University of Iowa, and I started working in the hospitals and clinics, ADHD clinics, inpatient, outpatient units, different things. Started getting into more severe, challenging behavior for kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities. So from there, I had some wonderful mentors, worked in some interesting NIH grants, and working in homes with families and trying to help them in their homes with their kids with challenging behavior as well. And so from there, I ended up at the Kennedy Krieger Institute and Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, doing my pre-doc and my post-doc fellowship on the outpatient units, and actually working with the kids in an outpatient setting, and then making sure that things generalized into homes and schools. So I've always kind of had this tie into community, home schools, and clinics. So I really enjoy working across and being a community partner, and that's what I really enjoy doing. And then moved to NAU, trying to get back home to Arizona. I was a professor at NAU in the psychology department for 10 years before I moved here, and I've been here. This is my 4th year at the University of Arizona. So here I run a couple of clinics for kids with challenging behavior. In psychiatry, I run one. Also at children's clinics right next door to TMC over there. If you guys have been over there, you should definitely visit. It's a great medical home model, very multidisciplinary, and a lot of fun. And then I also work in the CPAE clinic with children with autoimmune encephalopathy. So, and if you're interested in that kind of training, I'm happy to do something on PANS and PANDAS and autoimmune encephalopathy. It's another interesting area that's up and coming for sure, and controversial sometimes too. So anyhow, all right. So today I wanted to I have like a 2 parts that I want to do. First is like function-based assessment, kind of just the continuum and the range of looking at challenging behavior in a functional way. And then the second part, I want to do some things that might help you with your BIPs as well, linking treatment to function and your treatment and intervention strategies to your functions. So as I see different FBAs and BIPs come through the hospital, I get to see from all over, and it's a lot of fun for me. And I'm like, oh, what worked and what didn't? Tell me more. And it's like, oh, maybe if we change this up, maybe that would work better. Or I don't know. Let's go to the research. What else has been done with this? And so it's fun for me. I am just constantly wanting to learn more. But I'm happy to share what I've learned up to now. And some of my research as well. I'll kind of throw a couple cases in here too. It's kind of fun. So I want everybody to understand a little bit about the basic history of ABA, understand function-based approach, understand some research-based functions of behavior. I'll give you kind of a case conceptualization. We'll do a little activity and kind of understand the indirect and the direct methods of functional analysis and functional behavioral assessments and how they link to schools. So, all right. Anybody want to take a stab? I want to kind of go into some of the history. So, where did ABA come from? So, back in the day, there's a couple of people that were really important that made some real big contributions. One is not Santa Claus; it is a Russian physiologist from back in the day that did some things with dogs. Pavlov, all right, good. So to take you back to your history of psychology class. So Pavlov, right, so stimulus response kind of psychology, right? And taking off of his work came along somebody named, yes, nice, John Watson, yes. So John Watson came out of there, right? And so he was really interested in conditioned emotion, how things work. Little Albert is the one of the things that we remember often. So he was into stimulus response psychology, seeing it's like, okay, how does this work? And then along came another person. He did some. Okay, I'll just tell you. Edward Thorndike. Thorndike came up with the law of effect. He had puzzle boxes. He had cats that were hungry, and they would figure out how to get out of there. He really started some of our first learning curves. It's like, okay, so if I put this cat in this box, it can get out, and it takes this long. If I put them in box B, this long, and box C, and they get faster and faster. It's amazing, right? And so they were saying also there's something to the consequence side of things, too. It's not just stimulus response, but it actually also matters what happens right after the response occurs, right? So then B.F. Skinner started working off of all of their and other people's work as well, and he started talking about what we call the three-term contingency, the antecedent, behavior, consequence, and then all of the layers around that as well, because we have verbal behavior. We have covert verbal behavior, which are our thoughts, and we have overt verbal behavior, which is what I'm doing right now. So it's kind of interesting. So we get real complex really quickly. So from B.F. Skinner, where were, at that time, think about the 50s, around that time, where were individuals with disabilities? In the homes? Where else? State hospitals, right? Institutions, state hospitals, right. So a lot of times, I've talked to some of the old guys at some of the conferences I go to, and they were saying, yeah, we would get pulled in to some of these institutions, and we were running rat and pigeon studies, and they would ask us if we can help and see if these guys can learn. And so the thought was maybe they can't learn. And so some of the first clinical studies with individuals with disabilities came out of the ABA branch of things, so behavioral psychology, right? So if you see this is 1949, right? So kind of interesting, and definitely using different terms that we use than we use today. But some of those first studies, no, people can learn, right? It's just we just have to apply principles and see what values that the individual has, what matters to them, and then using some basic principles from behavioral psychology. So in 1968 came out the kind of seminal article really establishing the field of ABA. Going down that route. The cognitive revolution was going on at that time too, so some of behaviorism fell out of favor and out of focus. But it kept going. So there was a number of people that went and started looking at autism and started looking at different areas. And so this article just kind of outlines the different characteristics of ABA. All right. Whoops. And today there's licensure regulations for BCBAs, board certified behavior analysts, professional organizations. Currently in Arizona, We are under the Arizona Board of Psychological Examiners for our licenses, and so that's where we are today. There are a lot of techniques that came out, and you probably heard ABA mostly related to autism spectrum disorders. And there are a number of different teaching methods that came out, and the basic recommendations of 20 to 40 hours of intensive ABA for recently diagnosed little guys, right? And then you have the biggest bang for your buck in that way. That's a lot of work, by the way. So, and then also for the families, like having somebody in your home 20 to 40 hours, that's a lot, and multiple therapists. So if anybody's been in that world, it's interesting and exhausting. But there were many other areas that ABA focuses on. So it's not just treatment for autism. There's many, many different ways of teaching individuals with autism through the ABA methods. Okay, so we talk about discrete trial, naturalistic environment teaching, pivotal response training. There's so many different other methods that you have. You have a verbal behavior approach for language, which I know my wife is a bilingual SLP, so we always talk about stuff. We're such nerds. But anyhow, it's one of those things where you take this verbal behavior approach. We're just speaking different languages, really focusing on similar things. So it's great. So thinking about that, I kind of break things up. Our ABA-based services in Arizona. I used to own a company up in Flagstaff, and then ended up selling it before we came down here, but we did have services for challenging behavior through behavioral health, but we also had DDD services where we would send individuals to the homes for that 28 to 40 hours a week for autism. But we worked across the Navajo Nation, Hopi Nation, Apache, and all over northern Arizona with anyone with challenging behavior. We also provide, one of the things that I like to do a lot is parent management training. I do acceptance and commitment therapy. We do parent-child interaction, PCIT stuff. We do a lot of that too. But there's so many different things that you can do with those basic behavioral principles and then evidence-based practices, as we know. So I always think about it in that way. A lot of times we use the tools of single subject design, and I'll show you some of those today. And that can be really helpful to help us understand where we're going to go with what we're doing. And applications of ABA have been in so many different areas. Right now, one of the big areas that's booming in ABA is behavioral gerontology. So as folks are getting older, it's like, what do you do with folks that are on the other side of the spectrum of life, or the life course? It's kind of interesting. And you think about, wow, if we're losing skills, we have them gaining skills on this end, and now here we're losing some things. So what can we do? Can we make their lives better quality so they're happy? So it's interesting. So ADHD stuff, we do self-control versus impulsivity tests and stuff like that too in my clinic. Pediatric feeding disorders, rumination, pica, a lot of that. So it's always interesting. All right, so basically ABA is a behavior science. It's an umbrella. It's applying these principles of behavior to specific other behavior and to the study of socially relevant topics. It's based straightforward that way. Okay, so let's dive into there. So one of the first things that we try to do is try to think about the topography of behavior. All right, so what does behavior look like, right? So when we talk about that, if I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to refer someone to you for some help, right? And I want to know what the behavior looks like. I like to know if somebody tells me I'm going to get punched, right? I'm like, okay, you're sending somebody to me and I need to know what's going on. So do they hit with an open hand? Open fist? Will they grab my hair? A little I have. But, it's like one of those things where it's just that, I need to know that amongst professionals. And then are we looking at the same thing, right? So I always think about defining and operationally defining these kinds of behaviors. And so sometimes being happy can be really tough to see in an individual with CP, like with cerebral palsy. I'm not sure if they're happy or not. They seem to, sometimes they hit themselves. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But there are certain characteristics, once I get to know the person, the individual, I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what you do when you're happy. That's cool. So, and so we can read each other a little bit better. Self-injurious behavior. All right, self-injury, what have you seen? What's a topography that somebody's seen? Just throw it out there. Head banging, yep. Hand to head, right? Biting, hand, good. So those are very specific topographies, good. All right, so we do know in general, right, where does behavior is a function of many things. Genetics and physiology, we know certain folks have certain behavioral traits, right? The past environment and their history, but also the immediate environment, right? And thinking about topography does matter, especially as we communicate to one another. But when somebody's engaging in high rates of fist to head, what's your first question? Why? Right, exactly. Right. So the why is really function, right? It's like, why is this happening? And this is why we do this, right? So we start trying to understand what's going on. And when does behavior likely to occur, as well as when it doesn't occur? Because that's just as relevant as well when we're trying to figure things out. And then really identifying any consequences that might be maintaining that type of behavior, right? So we're trying to really take a snapshot. Classrooms can be super chaotic at times and tough to tease things out. So can homes. I think outpatient units and outpatient services can be a little easier sometimes, but kids don't always show me their true colors until a little while. So it can be challenging. So why functional behavioral assessments? I think you guys kind of know all these, so professional standards for many areas from APA, NASP, NIH, IDEA requirements for intervention. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, for example, also talks about it, and I'll show you that too. But it really helps us to understand the purpose of behavior, why it's happening, really linking treatment to our assessments, and then being as objective as possible. Okay. So for example, for ACAP, they talk about recommendations for intervention based on the science of applied behavior analysis for skill acquisition, as well as functional analyses of aberrant behavior are specifically emphasized as clinical standards from the ACAP or by the ACAP. So many different areas are saying, oh wow, there's a lot of years of research in this area. So I wanted to show you some of the continuum of functional behavioral assessments as the big umbrella, right? So one is, when we start trying to understand why things happen, is informant reports, right? So we want to get as much information as we can very quickly. So we indirectly quickly do interviews, rating scales, behavior logs. You guys ever use scatter plots? Anything like that? Scatter plots. I'm going to send you these PowerPoints as well because I'm going to be going really fast. so you can have them for future reference. I'm also going to send you some like a scatter plot that you can use in a Word document, as well as some other things that hopefully you find them useful. And if you have any questions, please just feel free to email me too. So some of the informant reports and the indirect things, we start getting and developing a hypothesis. I think this is why it's happening, maybe, right? So then the second part, a lot of times, we start going in and doing some observations, right? So it's like, okay, let me check this out. All right, so tell me a little bit more, and then I'm going to sit in the back and just kind of watch. Or if there's a two-way mirror, even better, right? And we might start looking at ABC data. Wow, that happened. The behavior was like boom, right? But then what happened right after? What happened right before? Scatter plots help me figure out severity as well as the time of day, right? So does it occur all day long, or is it just in math class at 10:30? So you really start, just really focusing in on the time of day and different things too that might matter. And finally, the gold standard is the functional manipulations or functional analysis. And this is where you're actually testing your hypothesis. So from the first two parts, you're actually getting a hypothesis, and then finally you're just like, okay, is this what's going on? And is it truly happening in this way and for this reason? And you really can verify that. And I'll show you some examples of those as well. Okay, all right. So one of the things is we do have some families that come in and they say, oh yeah, well, my pediatrician just told me to try timeout. Okay, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, are we thinking function at all? What's going on? And so I wanted to kind of throw this out there. If you're not thinking functionally, all right. So here's what might happen. So what is the most common parental or teacher reaction to problem behavior? What happens? Kind of, right? And in what way? Good. So they're acting out and they're just like bugging their neighbor. What do we do typically? Yeah, exactly, right? We reprimand them and punish them. We're like, hey, cut that out, man. Stop. Why are you doing that? And so, so we just might reprimand them in that way. What's the most commonly used classroom management or home punishment procedure for problem behavior? Timeout, right? Yeah. It's like, no, put them in timeout. Okay. So the research shows that social attention in the form of verbal disapproval or reprimands significantly worsens self-injury in about 1/4 of cases. Interesting, right? So we're just saying, yeah, just tell them to stop. Tell them to cut it out. Could we be doing something counter-therapeutic? Timeout significantly worsens self-injury in about 1/3 of cases. So, kind of interesting, and we'll get into some of that too and why. So thinking about that, if we're not thinking function, we might be just throwing things out there that might be counter-therapeutic or not going to work, and they're not going to be in our favor. So that's why function is important. It's, thinking about, functionally, and even with everybody, it's not, it's terrible, but yes, my wife and I were thinking about it. It's like, what are you getting out of this? And so, so thinking about this, you can think about it, with anything. There's a whole medical literature called family accommodations and secondary gains, which is function, which is really interesting as it relates to chronic illness and severe behavior. So it's interesting, yeah. So I have a sick child over time, that is always with me. Oh, they're sick, so I'm going to give them their tablet and their video games, and then trying to get them off of those things can be very difficult and get you back into school, right? So it's really interesting. The function is in many different areas, but sometimes it's just in different languages, which is kind of fun. So, okay, so there's a great research article that came out in 2013, and it was looking across from, I believe it was 1961 to the year 2000, and looking at functional analyses of problem behavior, and they found 981 of them, okay? So this spans a long time. Now, when they summarized these, there's like kids, adults, developmental delays, autism, typically developing kids across hospitals, schools, clinics, homes, institutions, vocational programs, and community, and all of those different topographies of behavior as well. So 981 is what, that's a lot. So it's like almost 1,000. So aggression, vocalization, self-injury, so there's a ton of non-compliance, elopement, tantrums, pica, some other things. Okay, so from this 981 functional analyses studies, they were able to tease apart 91.7% into these 4 functions, okay? So the 4 functions are escape, attention, tangibles, and automatic, all right? So these are your basic ones that have the most research behind them. And so thinking functionally, we're thinking about those 4 functions mainly. Now, on the very end, you'll see multiple, and that gets pretty it gets kind of difficult. So that might be multiply controlled. So those are kind of some mixes, and they can get kind of tough to tease apart. So, but for the most part, they're going to fall under these, all right? So I'm going to go over these just in kind of the way I like to think about them, because I like flowcharts a lot. It just helps me kind of conceptualize a little bit better. So kids might engage in challenging behavior for a gain function. So gain access to attention, right? Could be peer attention, teacher attention, the one-on-one. It could be anybody, right? Parents. So also engage in challenging behavior to gain access to preferred activities and toys, food, different kinds of things, as well as physical stimulation, right? So gaining access to physical stimulation. So all of these gain functions are positive reinforcement. I'm doing something to get access to something. And in the medical literature, they would say those are secondary gains that come from engaging in the behavior, all right? So on the other end the other branch is the escape branch. So this is engaging in problem behavior to escape attention, right? We have those kids who don't want to be around a lot of people, or social phobic, or a number of different things, right? So engaging in problem behavior to escape non-preferred activities, tasks, math, all sorts of things that I don't like to do. I don't want to pick up my toys. So also engaging in problem behavior to escape stimulation. So this is some kind of physical stimulation as well. So something that I don't like. It could be anxiety. It could be a lot of different things. So I remember we were in the hospital. We had, at the Kennedy Krieger Institute, we had one 18-year-old who would just constantly hit himself in the head with a fist to head, and it was really hard, and he was just bruising up, and it was really tough. And we ran all of our analyses, and we were like, oh my gosh, he does it all the time, and we don't know what's going on. And it was rough, but he had a neurology appointment, and it came back that he had a tumor. And as he hit himself in the head, it would release just for a few seconds, right? And so he was just constantly hitting. And so what happened when the tumor was removed? They were able to do that. Self-injury went away completely. So it was done. So think about the biobehavioral interactions that can occur as we are looking at function as well. Okay, so it's not just straightforward. That's where I love to collaborate with everybody, because I don't always understand. I'm just like, I got some ideas, some hypotheses. Let's test them out. Let's see if they work. But there's so much more that could be, part of that pattern, right? So this is kind of the general overview of how I like to look at functions of behavior. All right, so as we talked about, the positive reinforcement is gain function, the negative reinforcement is escape function, and then we also have this automatic reinforcement, which is physiological, intrinsic, like stereotypy and those kind of things as well. So, okay. A lot of times what we do in the functional analysis, so in clinics, we might run different control conditions. So for example, a free play might be something that's like, I make it Disneyland, make it super fun, high preferred activities and toys, no tasks are provided at all, they just get to do what they want. Escape, constantly presenting demands. And contingent on problem behavior, I'll give them a break. Problem behavior, give them a break. So you want to see if those cause and effect relationships are there or not. I like to see it in the natural environment if I can, but sometimes we have to set up and do analog conditions in the clinics. Or sometimes we just have parents run in and we just ask them to do things, and then we observe and take data. So, and then the other conditions are attention and tangible as well. So ignoring as well as taking away tangible items and see what they do. So it's kind of interesting. So for example, for Mike, this is a functional analysis here of aggressive behavior. As you can see, across the x-axis are the sessions, and the sessions are 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time, and then the y-axis, you see the responses per minute of aggressive behavior. So here, you see the highest that pops up, the pattern, is related to attention, right? So I would say, okay, we've tested out all of these, we hypothesized initially that it was attention maintained, and now we can confirm that and say, yep, I think Mike's aggressive behavior is maintained by access to attention, okay? So we might be able to do this, and again, you don't always have this luxury in classrooms. I totally get it. And so it can be challenging. So I'm gonna give you a couple other models that are a little bit briefer that you might be able to use as well, that I find helpful. So, okay, so let's keep moving. All right, so as you find the attention function, for example, then jumping into a treatment linked to that function specifically, and then can you move down that path? All right. So, and we'll talk about that in that second hour. I think of course I always have way too many slides, guys, so I apologize. But I just want to try to move fast. But I'd rather give you guys those, and then and happy to chat at another times too. So functional analyses have been used in a wide range of applied settings, including schools, outpatient clinics, homes, community settings, with a number of different childhood problem behavior. So, all right, so let's play a game real quick. All right, let me see if this pops up. All right, so this is name that function. All right, so tell me what you think.
Oh, hang on just 1 second. Hey, Roman, you need to do that worksheet right there. Hey, cut that out. What are you doing? Don't throw those, please. You're gonna hurt somebody. Hit your brother or something. Cut it out. Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to call you back in a minute. Hang on just 1 second. Roman, stop that. You need to keep going. Do your worksheet. Okay. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Don't throw that yellow one. Okay, come on. Do your worksheet. Let's go. That's not what we do with markers. No. Yeah, I'll have to call you back in a minute. Roman, stop, please. Stop. Okay. All right.
All right, does that look familiar to anyone? All right, what's the function here? Attention, good, but what else? Something else? Yes, escape and avoidance, good. So this is what I always think about when you talk about escape function. It's like escape to what? All right, so always think about that. It's like, no, he's escaping to attention for sure, right? So this is pretty clear. So good, nice job. Okay, let's see. All right, another one real quick.
Oh, hey, Roman, I need this. Okay, fine. You're going to throw things. Some things.
All right, what do you guys think? Tangibles, yeah, so exactly. So the removal, the antecedent is the removal of tangibles or preferred activities. Problem behavior occurs and I return it, right? So you're looking for that ABC kind of cause and effect relationship, you know? This is really hard. This is my oldest son, actually. He's 18, turns 18 on Sunday. So so he's little. But anyhow, yeah, so, and some of them get mixed, right? So you got the escape to attention. You could get escape to nothing or stereotypy. I have a lot of kids that do that. And escape to tangibles too, right? So it's kind of, I always think about, what are they escaping to? So it's a good thing to think about. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick case study, all right? So this is a case of Alexa. She was a 16-year-old Hispanic female. She had autism. She had moderate ID. She had disruptive behavior disorder, NOS, and epilepsy. She was taking Topamax, phenobarbital, Depakote, and risperidol. So the risperidol was to decrease her aggressive behavior, but it also has side effects, right? So it causes weight gain, and it can be really tough. And so she had no expressive communication either, okay? So she would do the leading. She'd grab your hand and she would lead you to what she wanted, and she would try to get it that way. So her behaviors of concern were some self-injury. It was pretty mild though, the self-injury. But the aggression was a little bit more worrisome. She would kick others, spit, hair pull, grab, slap, pinch, and scratch. She would grab at your cuticles and just kind of, it was painful. And then some dangerous acts and elopement as well. So she's 16 and running away from parents as well, right? But now she's on risperidol, she's gaining weight, can overpower her mom. And so it was getting kind of a little bit scary. So we started working on her aggressive behavior. So we started into trying to understand why she was doing this. So each of these conditions were 10 minutes. And so each data point, right? So we did a free play. She started engaging in some behavior. We did some attention. We're removing our attention. And then if she engaged in problem behavior, attention would come back and reprimands, as well as demands and given tasks. But you can see for demands, she actually liked to work with us all the time. She's like, well, more puzzles? Cool. And she was all about it. But she loved the wiggles. You guys know who the wiggles are? Yeah, so Captain Feathersword, so yeah. So she loved the videos of the wiggles. But once you turned it off, she would come over and just attack you, all right? And scratch you, hit, kick, spit, you name it. And then if you give it back, she backed off, right? So you can see here, the pattern that we're seeing is, right, her challenging behavior is maintained by access to tangible items. So we started going down the path, again, to me, it's not rocket science, right? It's just pretty straight function-based treatment options, right? So for example, the basic idea of functional communication training is that most behavior communicates a message. She's saying, no, turn it on, right? And so, but she can't because she's nonverbal. So we started just using some picture cards, some PEX cards, some basics, said, hey, wait, we're gonna turn it off. If you hand over the card, you can have it back. And so it was really straight, and we did a lot of that. And as you can see, the baseline over here, the rates were pretty high with no communication. Adding the communication in there, though, look at problem behavior, how it decreases, especially in sessions 9 and 10. Communication starts going up. I remove the cards for one 10-minute session, and she's beating me up again. And then implemented it again, and problem behavior goes down. Communication stays high, right? So it's really, we call this just an A-B design. Really easy, testing out our treatment, but we're also seeing now, I'm pretty convinced that our treatment in place is actually working. And that's what I wanted to know, because I wanted that to last over time. So in conjunction with the speech and language pathologist, we started getting, more and more of, picture exchange going. We got her 2 other expressive language responses going, and then in collaboration with the psychiatrist, we were showing them the data, her the data, and the psychiatrist, let's get her off this risperidol. This seems much more maintained by other things than biological. And so we got her off the risperidol, and she had an easier time with mom especially. So it's just kind of a snapshot case of what you can do with a basic functional analysis and just trying to tease things apart. But again, you have to get, I don't know, if you're used to this and it's easy, but sometimes it's not, and it can be super complex as well. So, okay, so I always think about this. We have that continuum of FBAs, right? And if you see this little picture, that's my dad in the background, and my youngest son eating my hair for some reason. But my dad he had so many tools, and he was always like, no, we got to have that right tool for the right job, right? And so he would build houses, he would take cars apart, and he's, yeah. And so anyhow, that's kind of how I feel too, right? So we think about what tool do we need? Can we use FBAs for that 80% of students, right? For primary prevention, right? Could we use, what can we use, right? So yeah, so I'm going to show you some different things we can, but depending on the population, the challenge in behavior, the severity as well, what tool do we need at that time? Will an indirect assessment, will it suffice? And I can, got this, nailed it, right? And we can really help that student and that teacher, and so thinking about that way. All right, so we all know kind of the legalese about FBAs. Needed for children who display problem behavior, require intervention and placement changes as well. So one of the things I think is interesting just to think about, misconduct is not a manifestation of a child's disability, but an FBA must be conducted as appropriate. So in the legal language, it's as appropriate, right? There are some things that are very appropriate that we can do indirectly, but when it becomes more challenging, more severe, what's more appropriate might be the full functional analysis. So again, there's that continuum from one to the next, right? So they talk also about properly trained professionals and FBAs and BIPs and districts' responsibility to work and provide professional development as well. So that's good stuff. All right. Okay, so where do we start? We talked about operationally defining challenging behavior and thinking about, okay, there's some things that are hard to define. So, think about the term attitude adjustment, right? So you say, well, what does that mean, right? What does that look like? Would they have a better attitude? What are we going to see, right? What's observable? Well, we want to see that he's, maybe Richie's a nicer person, right? Well, let's maybe he uses please and thank you more often. Maybe his tone of voice comes off better, right? And we need to, change some of that. But maybe he also, independent initiation of greetings. He's actually polite and holding doors for people and stuff like that too. So how can we really get down to what the behavior looks like and what would we like him to do? I like to think about FBA as a scientific method in many ways too. So we're really formulating hypotheses, right? And then we want to test our hypotheses, and then we want to collect data to support or refute our hypotheses, right? And then then depending on where we're at, accept or reject, and then we're going to move forward with function-based treatment linked to that function. So I like to think about it in that way. All right, so what we have found and in the literature is indirect methods, what they do is like, okay, so these are the behavior checklists and everything too. If you use an indirect method, there is a 25 to 38% chance that you're going to actually nail the function perfectly, right, and identify it. If you go up and you do observations on top of that, then there's 35 to 50% chance that you're going to identify the function, and then you'll be able to treat appropriately. But if you actually do the functional analysis methods and manipulate things a little bit more, there's a much higher rate, percentage is 85 to 95%. That you'll be able to identify that function and then do treatment. So depending on, and again, if you're working with typically developing kids though, it could be very different. You might be able to be fine with the indirect methods and great. But depending on, again, what's the tool you need for that individual child. So, all right, so again, indirect methods, naturalistic, and then the functional analysis methods. So, all right, so we're gonna do a little activity. We have good time here. All right. Here we go.
One to each person, or?
Yeah, let's see. I think I did 70.
Okay.
So do you want me to start? I can throw some on that side too.
Yeah, and you can just hand off to people. And
Yeah. Okay.
honks.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Maybe have you guys grab those and keep handing them back there. Okay, so these, I know it looks kind of like French or Greek or something, but this is a basic data sheet. And it's basically, this is a 6-second partial interval data collection recording system, all right? You can use, there's some really cool things actually out there. There's a good, I like it, this one app, and they don't pay me for this, I swear. It's just called the Bot. It's like behavior observation tool. And it's really easy to use, and you can use it in the classroom or anywhere in clinic, and it exports into Excel. And so it's kind of, you can just graph it. It's really cool. So anyhow, so behavior observation tool, if you guys are interested, the Bot. It's a good one. But so what we're going to do is I want you to get just a little bit of experience doing a quick observation, okay? And so you can feel comfortable. Maybe you guys do these all the time too. But as we talked about operationally defining behaviors, I always say, what's the challenging behavior, but then, what are they doing correctly as well, right? So thinking about those things as well. So in this, each box on here, each interval is going to be 6 seconds, all right? So as we move through, we can actually label, like number 1, one behavior, 2, another behavior, and all you have to do is make a mark through if it occurred within that 6-second interval, okay? If it occurred during that time, yep, I mark it. If it did, mark it. If it didn't, just leave it alone. Don't mark it, okay? So I'm going to be calling out every 6 seconds, time. And so that means you need to move to the next interval, okay? Until we're done with the video. Okay, does that make sense? We're going to watch the video first, and then I'll go over that one more time, okay? All right. Great. All right.
Did you do it? Nice! It's not that bad. This is yucky, though, I think. It was so yucky. Green beans are so yucky. You're almost done.
All right, there's our green bean girl. All right, so what's her task? Eat a green bean, right? Okay, so what problem behavior did you see here? Screaming, number 1, right? Okay, got that, right, good. Screaming, anything else? Yeah, right, like fist to table, right? I mean, she's like emphatic. Oh, I'm not eating again. All right, good. All right, so what did you see that was appropriate? You mean Mom? Mom was awesome, right? Yeah. She was just like, did you do it? She was like, amazing. I wish I had all my moms like that. But yeah, so interesting. But did she eat? Yep. Yeah. She was eating the whole time, right? She was like, yeah. Lots of noise. So interesting. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is the number 1, I'd like you to write down screaming, all right? Oh, wait, do you want to do, what should be easier? Fist? Nah, that's too easy. Let's do screaming. All right. Let's do screaming. The second one is ingestion of green beans. Okay? All right. So is everybody on the same page of what ingestion of green beans would look like? Good. Yeah. Swallowing it? Is it swallowing? Oh, down at the very bottom, there's like 1 and 2, I think, down here.
Sure.
Yeah, you can do 1, 2. They're mini. So yeah, so you can write down, the behaviors there. So 1 is screaming, 2 is, let's just do eating green beans, right? Okay. So, all right, so I'm going to play it again. And every 6 seconds, I'm just going to say time. And then you move to the next little block. Okay? Time. You move to the next little block. Yes? Yeah, so as the first box is where you're going to start. So if you hear screaming, and then you want to put a line / through 1, right? Because that means it did occur within that 6-second interval of time. And then move to the next one when I say time. So if you see her eating a green bean, you put a / through 2 as well. All right? And so keep moving through until the end of the video. It's not that long. It really isn't. It'll seem long for a second. So, all right. So, yes?
Will we get another copy of a clean copy of these?
Sure, if you want it. Yeah, happy to send those over in the packet too. Yeah, so that's, yeah. Okay, you guys ready? Ready to rock and roll? All right, let's give it a shot. Okay. Oops, I've got to use this.
Go ahead, sis.
Time. 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 Time.
Did you do it?
Time.
It's not that bad.
Time. 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 So go to the second row if you need to.
Almost done.
Time. 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 All right, there we go. Okay, so I want everybody to count up how many blocks you used, number 1, okay? I always put a little hatch mark at the very end of that last one, kind of just like this is the end. And so I know it's my nerdiness. So count up how many blocks you used, and then also count up how many 1s and how many 2s you have, okay? And put it next down to the bottom. All right. Sorry. So as you have those numbers, I want you to turn to a neighbor and compare. All right. So how many green beans did our little girl eat? I got 3. I got 3. Okay. Anybody get 4? Some 4s. Anybody get 5? Green beans that she ate. You got 5? Oh, you had 5? Okay.
It was hard to tell because she had her hand.
Yeah, sometimes she had her hand in front and you were like, did she really eat that one or not, right? Yeah, good. So it's interesting. Okay, how many intervals did she actually scream through? 15. Or 15? Okay. What else? Anybody have something else? 17. Okay. All right, this is called observer drift, right, guys? Okay. So it's kind of interesting. It's tough. Did anybody have trouble discriminating between what was whine, cry, complain? right? Okay, so this is our operational definitions, right? This is really hard. And we're looking and talking about reliability now, aren't we? We're like, okay, are reliable observers of that behavior? That was a 2-minute clip, right? So now, what about when in the classroom, right? Or when we're in a clinic or in the home, So it can be really, really tough. But with practice, we get good at this. And if you have somebody that you work with really well, it's awesome too, because I like that second pair of eyes. So I love having interns, and I teach to the psych fellows too, or pediatrics, and so I'm like, oh no, come on, we're gonna go and observe this. And so, but let's get good, and get on the same page together. So getting a buddy can always help too. So, but yeah, it's kind of. Was it fun? Kind of. All right, good. So I just wanted to give you the experience. I mean, you guys obviously do, I'm sure, do observations and stuff too. This is just another way, another tool, right, in your backpack that if you find it, useful. Again, so say this is green bean girl, right? All they have to eat is green beans, and so we got to do something. Maybe we need to intervene. So let's dip them in chocolate, see if she eats more, right? Or ketchup. Hey, there you go. Yeah, that's a good idea. Ketchup or mustard, right? And so see if she eats more. We can then, take it out and just do green beans again. We can do kind of like an A-B kind of a thing, Let's test it out, see what happens. And so you can look at the rate, the frequency, whatever you need to, duration, there's latency. So things to think about as we're kind of moving forward. So, okay, let's take a 10-minute break, and then let's get back into some other things. So, all right, thanks. All right. So let's continue on with assessment, and then we'll get into we won't have time on the function-based treatment, like all of it. So I'll get through some of it, and then again, I'll provide you with the PowerPoints and everything too, so you can go through it. And if you have questions, again, so yeah, please feel free to contact me as a resource. So. Okay, so thinking about our indirect methods of FBAs in general, I'm just going to show you like 3 different ones, and they're kind of different. What we do know is, with rating scales and checklists, they can be really helpful for us. We're attempting to try to infer behavior function from problem behavior. So again, it's hypothesizing, and so we're not necessarily ruling things in or out necessarily. We're just trying to get a hypothesis of what's going on. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the MASS. It's the Motivation Assessment Scale. I know some of you are familiar with this. It has like 20 questions and 4 potential functions for, you got your escape, attention, tangible, and then automatic. So you have those. This is, you can do some nice little graphs with them, and you can see the ratings even across different providers. So you can get different teachers, you can get parent reports, but sometimes you find you're like, wow, not everybody's agreeing, so that can be challenging. But and then is this sensitive enough to be able to understand? Yeah, this is the function or not. So for example, this one, you see the blue right there. It's pretty high for tangibles, right, across everybody. So I'd say, yeah, you know what? There's something with tangibles for sure, but maybe some attention's going on as well. But 2 people are reporting that, 1 person isn't. So again, still hypothesis generating here. All right, there's another one too that is often used. It's the FAST, the Functional Analysis Screening Tool, and this has 16 questions for potential functions as well. And it also does a little bit more into the automatic or the sensory reinforcement as well, and that can help. So again, you can do a lot of different things with these, but this is that screening tool. It's not too bad either. So we developed one, and we just finished the school version. We are validating it right now. So I'm going to give you a copy of that so you can see if you like it. We call it the function of behavior academic setting. When I moved here from NAU, I really wanted to have a tool that was more of an interview based quick screener. All right, so in psychiatry, I teach the psychiatry fellows and also developmental behavioral pediatric, the fellows as well. And so I wanted to have something that they could use to really start thinking function first. So, for example, they would have patients coming in and it was like, well, my kid's tantruming all the time. And so I was like, oh, use our screening tool. And so we called it the FOB-Med. And so we've been doing, what we've been doing is actually doing the FOB-Med with medical professionals and then actually doing a functional analysis in our clinics and see if they match. because that's what we want to see, right? So it's like, yeah, no, we identified the hypothesized function here, but now we confirmed that it's right on or not. So we've got about 100 now, and it's looking pretty good. So, all right, but we do have the academic setting one. We've just released this one. We have only 3 with the functional analysis that match, and they match really actually pretty well. So this is it's an interview form, and so you have 8 questions. So 4 trying to look at the antecedents, and then 4 follow-ups to try to understand the consequences. I put in, the psychiatrists and the pediatricians wanted like frequency and severity ratings as well, and I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So we have those as well. So this is what this looks like. It's teeny on this one, right? Sorry, guys. You get a copy of this though. But the first 2, I don't know, call them layers, whatever they are, but it's related to attention-seeking behavior. The second 2 are for tangibles. The third is escape from demands. And then the fourth one at the very bottom is, do you see the child engaging in the behavior while they're alone? Because that indicates more of, this is something physiological that probably feels good, it's okay. So then you start going down that path as well. So this is something I'll provide. If you guys don't use a form, I mean, feel free to use ours if you'd like, or the FAST or the MASS, any of those indirect methods that can help you out start hypothesizing function. So has anybody used any of those before? No? Or does somebody else use other things too? Indirect methods? No? Okay, all right. Okay, we'll see what you think. All right, so let's talk about a couple of different of the direct methods. And so we just took some data, and just to get, you can actually take those numbers and then start graphing them. Just frequency, how often did it occur, some straightforward, just graphs, line graphs. It doesn't have to be fancy. You could even use bar graphs if you want. There's 2 areas in the literature that are really applied to schools. That these are a little bit easier, because I know there's certain limitations for sure in school settings. You don't want to disrupt the whole classroom, but if it's already being disrupted, then that's a lot easier to go in there and take some observations. But a lot of times, you don't want to disrupt everything. Teachers can. I have a lot of pushback sometimes with teachers, and then sometimes they're like, "No, please come in," and so. It depends, right? So there's a lot of different variables working in schools as working in, same thing as I end up taking kids to Best Buy and running functional analyses there, or at Costco, but there's limitations there as well. So the brief functional analysis model is actually pretty easy. This is my favorite, but was my training. The trial-based functional analysis is the other. So let me just show you a couple of examples of that. So for example, this is one of our little girls, Shauna, 11-year-old African-American female student, developmental delays, cerebral palsy, asthma, seizure disorder, and ADHD. She was really disruptive, aggressive, self-injurious. She would always scream loudly and hit her hand on the desk really loud, and that was really disruptive to the classroom. So talking with the teachers, they're like, yeah, it really happens a lot when we put her in small groups. And so that was really interesting. And so we started just doing some observations, and we started noticing, it's like, okay, yes, in small groups, she was really loud, she hit her hand a lot more. So we started teasing things apart and looking at escape to attention, because she seemed to really like attention from the teacher and from the aide. And so we're like, okay, wait a minute, that's interesting. So what we started doing is, like, I had the teacher wear a motivator, which just vibrates every so often. So every 45 seconds, it would vibrate, and she would go over and she would go, hey, I like how you're sitting down, touch, and then walk away every 45 seconds. And then the aide would come over, and every time she finished something, she would praise her. And so we kind of flipped it around. And it was really intensive at first, but then you start fading it out. And then we taught indoor-outdoor voice pretty quickly, and then redirection. Every time she was about to hit, we'd be like, oh, remember, let's have our hands down. So we started one-step directions and things like that too. And then we took data on the teacher implementing it, and here's the graph. So you can see in our brief functional analysis, these are 5-minute conditions. So think about that. That's 10 minutes of her, high percentages of problem behavior, and then we compared that to just free play, right? So it's just like free play, she's not doing it. But you give her small groups, boom, there's exactly what the teacher's saying, right? And then free play again, a little bit of, she's loud, it's all right. And then with the treatment in place, though, we started demands again in the small groups, and then you can see with everything, it's pretty much the same as free play. And so that was a teacher running everything too. So you can see, 5-minute conditions. You can kind of tease those things apart pretty quickly and jump into treatment if you need to. So that was one example of a brief functional analysis. So these are just briefs, right? So this is another young man, 9-year-old Native American student. Learning disabilities and disruptive behavior disorder not otherwise specified. He was aggressive, destructive, really non-compliant. There's a task refusal all over the place. So we ran a little functional analysis. Again, these are 5-minute conditions, right? So it's like 35 minutes, 40 minutes, so under an hour, we're starting to whoa, okay, demands, he's trying to escape things. He's actually trying to get access to tangible items as well. And so we also wanted to look at, was he actually doing anything at all? And so we just did compliance to any tasks, and we're like, no, he's not working at all. So he's got nothing. So from here, we went into treatment as well. So it's kind of like a little snapshot, but within an hour, sometimes you can get enough information, and you're like, oh, okay, we can roll right into treatment, but that's my baseline, and roll from there. So, okay, so this is another one. I haven't done many of these, but I have some students that have, and they're trial-based functional analyses. These came out around 2011 and have been more and more popular in schools. And they're kind of just a basic test and control condition, which is kind of interesting. They're 2 minutes long. It's just 2 minutes, so it's not bad. So if you can identify using the indirect method, so use one of the rating forms with the teacher, and you're like, okay, so when do you think it's going to happen? All right, so let's do 2 minutes during that time and see if we can capture it, right? And so you say, okay, let's set things up, see if you got it in 2 minutes, and then you just back off if you do see any of the problem behavior. And then you get a control condition where it's the opposite of that, right? So, peer attention versus, the control, I think for that one was, I can't remember. But yeah, so peer attention, I think, so there's escape, and then the peer attention, I don't remember actually. So anyhow, but you get a control condition, something the opposite that you can find. So I have some citations and things that you can look them up, or I'm happy to send you some more articles. But this is not one that I don't use too much, but it's gotten a lot of momentum in the literature too, in school psych review and things too. So it's a really good one. But yeah, see if if it might be something that you could use as well. So. All right, okay, so I think we want to go ahead and switch over to the other PowerPoint. Okay, all right, so let's talk about some function-based treatment. So once you've identified the function and you feel pretty comfortable with that, whether you have just a hypothesis, sometimes that's all we can get, and we don't have the luxury of doing more, or it's just not warranted. If I feel pretty comfortable, I think we got the hypothesized function there. Well, let's roll into treatments, right? So some of the objectives, again, for this are a little bit different, right? But it's function-based treatment strategies linked to the identified or hypothesized function. Basic motivation strategies, and then some suggestions for each of those from the literature. Okay, so one of the things that I'm sure you guys always think about too is when we have children with challenging behavior, especially in academic settings, even social settings in general, is it related to skill deficit? Is it motivation? What is it? So there's a lot of different variables that we're trying to look at, right? So we run social skills groups in psychiatry for some of our younger kids. And so I have a lot of our interns running things, and it's always interesting. I have some kids that are on the spectrum, and it's like, I know exactly what to do, I just don't care. I'm like, oh, you don't want any friends? No. Okay. But you've been through my social skills things like 3 times. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of fun, and I earn tokens. I'm like, oh, okay. So again, it's not a skill deficit. It's motivation, right? That's different. It's very different. So things to think about as you're kind of, what you run into is amazing. I love kids. Okay, so, all right, so think about motivation. I always get the questions too. especially as on the behavior analysis side. Well, this is external motivation, it's extrinsic, and we want them to be, intrinsically motivated to do this. Like I'm always, for sure. We want it to go intrinsic, right? I want my teens to wash the dishes because they love living at my house, right? I want my 4-year-old to brush his teeth. What's reinforcing about brushing teeth as a 4-year-old, right? It's just not, it's aversive, right? It's just unpleasant. I'm like, oh gosh, I can't even find a toothpaste that, and so it's really interesting. So, but can we get it there, right? Do we have to contrive the situation until it goes more intrinsic? And that's a lot of times, what happens. And so I completely agree. I would love things to be more intrinsic, but sometimes we have to contrive the environment in those different ways. So motivation, think about, are things, if we provide things immediately versus more delayed. We'll talk real quick about token economy systems, for example. Immediate versus delayed, it can be a big deal, right? So understanding how to assess preferred items and activities for each individual student. So as you're working with kids, right, and students, what are they interested in? And it's a tough one sometimes, if you have to do an IQ test. What do you guys use? Are you allowed to use? Is it going to get you not being standardized and doing the whisk? It's some of the things to think about as well. But do you have to? And then just there's a caveat in your report. There's a lot of things to think about. So understanding how and when to use them in the classroom settings and increase compliance. A lot of times we run into challenges is like, if we have some token economy system and he's earning tokens and then the people at the table are like, how come he earns them and I can't? I'm like, well, yeah, that's a good question. So, and understand like when things are ineffective and they need to be reassessed. So, one of the big things that I always talk to our interns about is really pairing yourself when you meet a student, right? It's interesting. Back to John Watson and Pavlov, right? If we pair ourselves with fun activities, what happens via classical conditioning, right? So we start having properties that are happy, right? So if hey, let's get some ice cream together, So what kind of conditioned emotion are we trying to help out, right? And it's important. It really is. And so getting yourself paired with good things initially is really great. When we start working with kids with autism, and they engage in stereotypy, maybe they have 1 or 2 things that they're interested in that are toys. Can you pair yourself in any way? But it usually takes like 3 sessions and then we actually start introducing something, but otherwise we don't. It just doesn't work. Like, why would I do something for you? I don't even know you and I don't like you. So pairing is really important, right? So, okay. So there's a number of different reinforcers when you talk about reinforcement. Edibles, sensory reinforcers, tangible reinforcers, activity reinforcers, social reinforcers, those kind of things. Remember, a reinforcer is only a reinforcer if it increases behavior, right? So I'll tell you a quick story. So when I was a master's student, I was working in my lab and everything, and so I had to do my first couple of IQ tests, right? And so I'm like, oh gosh, all right, here we go. But I'm Mr. Behavior, right? I got this down. And so I had my little tackle box full of like M&Ms, and I had gummy bears cut into like 6 pieces. It was like all these different things, sugar cereals. I was like, okay, here we go. So I go in and have a little guy, and he is just like, looks at my tackle box. I'm like, hey, what do you want to work for, buddy? And he just looks at me and is like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, you want anything of these? And he's like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. What am I gonna do? Right? And so I'm just like, I'm at a loss. I'm totally at a loss. And so I go over to my graduate school giant backpack, right? And so I'm rummaging through, and for some reason I had a roll of masking tape and it fell out. And this kid's eyes got really big. And I'm like, you want to work for masking tape? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's go. And so I started asking him questions, and I'd rip off a piece. I'm like, shh, here you go. And he's like, woohoo. And he's running around the room, and he's putting it on the couches, he's putting it on the walls, and we got masking tape. By the end, it was just covered. Everything was covered in masking tape. And so I go out, it was the end of the day, parent came and got him, and I'm like, hey, so does he like sugar cereals? Does he like candy or anything? She's like, he gets all that at home, you know. He can have anything he wants, I don't care. And I'm like, what about masking tape? And she's like, no, he can't have masking tape. I'm like, oh no. I'm like shutting the door, you know. It was one of those things, but that kid taught me a lot. That kid taught me a reinforcer is only a reinforcer if it increases behavior, right? And so it only works if it's valuable, right? So, you know, when I have parents come in, we tried positive reinforcement. I'm like, really? Let's talk about that. There's many variables around positive reinforcement, right? Why does it have value? Why doesn't it? Can we increase it if it's neutral? Yeah, there's a lot of things we can do. So it gets really complex really fast. So, but things to think about, I know. So anyhow, token economy systems. How many of you have implemented a token economy system in a classroom or at home? Is everybody? Okay, good. How was the, give me thumbs up or thumbs down. Helpful, not helpful? Pretty helpful? Meh. Okay. All right. So there's some pitfalls to this. So we talk about primary reinforcers, things that food, water, those kind of things, attention, physical contact, those things that are required for life are primary versus conditioned reinforcers. They're kind of paired with it or something we can earn to trade in for those things as well. So we use tokens and things too, points, coins. I love Party City because they have tons of like tokens that you can get. And so, so I use a lot of those with families. And then you have those backups, you know, how much is it worth? So it's a true economy system that you're putting in place for that individual child or for all your kids at home. So the question is like how often to exchange. So the most kids I have right now, I think in psychiatry are ADHD kids. And some of them need to be exchanged every day, okay? If not, you lost them. They're not going to be motivated to do anything for you. And it'll take them 4 hours to get through homework. And so, but with tokens, right, and backup reinforcers, sometimes every day, then we try to stretch it to 2. And then some of them can wait till Friday to exchange. But, you know, it matters, right? How often it, you know, it occurs, how the quality of reinforcement too, that's the other thing too. You know, so there's a lot of different things that are important to think about. The pitfalls, the number one thing I tell families and teachers is basically they're going to lose their value pretty quickly the more they earn. So you have to reassess and make sure you do that often. So something to think about. Another thing that can really promote compliance as well as help with routine and predictability is some kind of structure. So some teachers and some parents are really good at using these visual schedules. Speech and language pathologists that I work with too, they use a lot of if-then, those kind of things. And so I'm sure you guys probably do too. There's some real basics, but think about structure, it does equal predictability. So if it's more predictable, we all like things to be predictable for ourselves. Sometimes I forget that. I'm like, no, come on, let's just go. You know, they're like, wait, what am I doing? You know, what are we doing next? I don't even know. And so, yeah, so it throws kids off sometimes. So think about that. What do you need? Do you need to, sometimes, you know, I fade it out too when I can, and I just put it, you know, in writing pretty soon, you know, things like that. Oh, can you write it down? Here's what we're gonna do, you know, and so they're like, oh yeah, no, this is what we usually do, so. Okay, so those kind of things can help out with motivation for sure. I always think about the biggest challenge that I usually have is escape maintain behavior. So kids always have a choice. Think about this. They can, on one end, complete tasks and gain access to positive reinforcement. And sometimes it's just closure. It's just like, no, got that done. I'm kind of glad I learned that. That was cool, right? And we want kids to learn and to enjoy learning, right? And so sometimes it is extrinsic, and then sometimes it's just intrinsic. But it's positive reinforcement for finishing a task. Or some of our kids choose to engage in problem behavior to escape from things that they don't want to do, and it can become problematic. So it's interesting doing some of the research in this area. 48% of children learn to engage in problem behavior to escape tasks, negative reinforcement. Okay, so these are typically developing kids. So your everyday guys, so almost half, right? So can develop these patterns. So we talked about brief functional analyses. So we're looking at reasons why, and again, this is more related to escape maintain behavior. So one of my questions was, okay, so for kids who demonstrate problem behavior when presented with these tasks, can we get them to be more compliant and appropriate by just providing them with choices of different qualities of attention? did you guys ever have a favorite uncle or teacher that was like, had a great quality of attention? They were like, that's high quality attention, you know? And so thinking about that person, this is what I kept thinking. I'm like, wow, what if we just shifted the quality of attention, you know? So could we then get them to work without using intrusive treatments in any way, right? And so getting away from those kind of things if all possible. So I did this 2-part study. It was kind of fun. We did a brief functional analysis first to identify function. And the second part, I actually started providing them with different qualities of attention, see what happened, right? If we would get more out of them. So I used the tasks from the first one that they were kicking my butt for to get out of, and then I used them in phase 2 with high and low qualities of attention. So I started out with Carter. I have like 15 of these kids that showed the same patterns, which is kind of interesting. He was referred for non-compliant behavior, aggressive behavior, and property destruction across home and school. It was hypothesized, talking to mom, that he engaged in problem behavior in order to either gain access to parent or teacher attention or to escape from demands, or both. So, functional analysis, again, 5-minute conditions, 35 minutes, right? Just setting these up. Free play with low quality attention. We have no problem behavior down there. The biggest one, right, is the demands with low quality attention. But then I switched it up and I did demands with high quality attention. So all of a sudden, problem behavior went down. So I knew he was sensitive to changes in qualities of attention, all right? So I broke down qualities of attention into enthusiasm, physical contact, or proximity, and eye contact. And so I listed out all of these different qualities of attention. And then I provided choices. So if you think of one side of the room is one choice, the other side of the room is the other choice, here's what we did. So 5-minute conditions, he could play free play as much as he wanted with high quality attention, or he could do his demands with low quality attention. Guess what he chose 100% of the time? Free play with high quality attention. Woohoo, right? So now, switched it up on him. Okay, demands now with high quality attention, or you can do free play over here, no demands with low quality attention. Well, he started doing some demands, which is kind of interesting, right? So then I reversed back and I said, okay, free play again, high quality attention, 100% of the time he was on it. This time though, he chose to do demands 100% of the time with high quality attention and didn't go to the free play, which is kind of interesting, right? And then we just went back. So it just kind of reversal back and forth, back and forth. But what the kid did, he kept following the high quality attention. That's what he was really most interested in. And he didn't care what he had to do, but hey, I'm right here with you. I'll do anything, you know, and it helped promote compliance, right? So kind of interesting, right, in that way. So we were able to, escape was always available. He had a choice to jump to one side or the other. He didn't have to stick with us. But by just allocating high quality attention and figuring out what he enjoyed, we were able to get more compliance. So we could actually bias him to choose the higher quality attention and then positive reinforcement and actually complete demands instead of trying to escape it all the time. So, okay, so it's kind of one of those little snapshot with typically developing kids that we do using a functional analysis and then choices. So, okay, all right. Yes?
What's an example of high quality?
Yes, good question. So, so everybody's different, right? So I have this little preference assessment that I do that trying to understand basically like it's very dynamic. So thinking about physical contact or close proximity, right? Some kids will just like, no, I want you right here. I want you with me, you know, at the hip. And I want physical contact. Some kids are like, nope, 2 feet away. Some kids want this, you know. So that's one variable or one quality of attention. And then some kids, there's been some studies done showing that some kids will choose to be reprimanded over praised. So it's important to understand what they want and at what times. So yeah, do they like praise and you want to talk about positive themes, or do you talk about negative themes and reprimand and you kind of boss them around? Some kids really like that. And so voice enthusiasm is another one too. It's like, hey, I love that you're working with me today. You know, I'm so happy to be here as your one-on-one, right? So I don't know how often we really hear that, but but you know, so it's, but what if we had all of our one-on-ones matched the high quality attention of each student. Would we get more compliance out of them? Right? And so that's what this is kind of one of the reasons I did this study. And so, like I said, I have 15 kids. They're all typically developing kids with challenging behavior, but they all showed the same pattern. And so sometimes even with parents, I find mismatches. I had one 14-year-old boy with autism who his dad was a huge railroad worker and come and give him the noogie, He's like, hey, son, And oh my gosh. And I did a whole qualities of attention assessment to see what he wanted. And he's like, I want dad to sit on that side and I don't want him to talk. I'm like, oh, I felt so sad. But that was what he wanted from dad. And then with mom, I want you right next to me. Don't touch me. But I want to talk about volcanoes, and I just want you to praise me for them. Right on. Okay. Very different qualities of attention, right? But think about ourselves, too, with our significant others, right? I had a crappy day. I just need you to sit and listen to me, please. We do that all the time. Or, it's like, oh, can we snuggle on Netflix? Is that cool? I want physical contact. And yeah, so it's interesting, right? It's dynamic. It varies and it waxes and wanes in different ways. So qualities of attention can be really powerful in that way too. So something to think about. Anyhow, so yeah, good questions. Any other questions on that? No? I have my little... Right, and that's really, really hard. I have an assessment that's a PowerPoint, and they just point to what they like, and they have little videos embedded. And then I also have just like a sheet that you can fill out and ask them too, if you want. So I'm happy to share that too sometime. Yeah, it'd be kind of fun. So if you want to do, I think it'd be great. So, or we should do a training with all the one-on-ones. And then that'd be cool. Okay, never mind. All right, let's keep going. So, so back to our function-based treatments linked to function. So once we identify it, it's starting to move forward. Most behavioral interventions, what we're trying to do is change the value of the reinforcer, right? So if I want to escape, that's what I want to get out of this. How can we change the value of escape to where they want to stay and actually work with us, right? So that's really kind of what we're doing. We have a ton of different things and looks like a different language up there, but yes, it's in order to, help them and bias them to, we want you to stay and learn, You also we're eliminating and maintaining contingency, changing the current pattern, right, or the sequence of events. That's what we're trying to do as well with behavioral interventions. And then the other thing we're trying to do is replace the challenging behavior with socially acceptable ones, right? And so can we get them to communicate better and more often and more precisely, so thinking about it in that way as well. So those are kind of the three things that we're really trying to do with behavioral interventions. All right, let's see. Okay, we only have a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to share a few of the escape maintain stuff, and then we'll probably have to end or leave a little bit more open for some questions. Okay, so when you look at the ABCs of behavior, back to kind of our origins, ABA style, right? So you got your antecedent. So the escape function, you've got antecedent is always the presentation of a task or a demand. Oh, yeah, what color is this? Or please fill out this, work on this worksheet, whatever it may be, right? Or clean up your Legos is what I always do. And then you have problem behavior, and then do you allow for escape, delay, and always thinking about escape to what, right? The nicest thing is for escape maintained behavior, there's the widest variety of interventions and strategies available in the research, which is really great, because sometimes I'm like at a loss and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to read some more articles. There's some other things that I know other people way smarter than me have figured out, and I need to use that. So kids can be tough. And so I always think about the task itself, and I think this is an important one. So is it difficult or complex, right? Does my child have a learning disability? Is it just too difficult past their skill level, right? It requires effort, right? So how much effort is required, right? So I always think about that too with a lot of our kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities. It's really easy to do this and then people come running and do things versus communicate to you a lot of different things if I have an AAC device that I have to go through 4 pages to find and then communicate. This is way easier, right? So I think about effort within tasks as well. And pleasant, uncomfortable things that I have to do. It's less preferred compared to my PS4, bottom line, right? So those are kind of things. Thinking about the task and demands that you're actually presenting. So here's a number of different, your basics for escape maintained behavior as well. So these things you can think about. Antecedent manipulations, I think, are pretty straightforward. Most teachers jump right into these, right? So it's like, oh, well, let's just shorten that, right? Let's just make it less. Decrease the effort they have to put forth. Providing help. Oh, you just need to ask, buddy, and then I'll come and help you with that, and I'll teach you a little bit more, right? So providing help. And then quality of attention, you can add that on, see if that changes anything as well, something else to think about. Behavioral momentum is another interesting one. There's a lot of literature based on that. These are high probability requests and then interspersing low probability requests. So some of my big guys that I work at the group home with might be, we need them to get the trash out, and they like to play basketball. So I'm like, okay, buddy, let's go. Trash can's right there. And we're just like, okay, oh, you shoot. Oh, I shoot. Okay, drag it from there to there. Okay, back to basketball. And so it's behavioral momentum. You get them rolling, low preferred, right back to high, low preferred, right back to high. Can you intersperse it that way and get that momentum going? So sometimes that can work really well. Sometimes it looks like smoke and mirrors, but it's but it can work well. It's funny because parent-child interaction therapy does the same thing if you start getting into that therapy, because you do child-directed interactions and you're play, and then pick up one Lego, come right back. So it's still that high preferred activity, a less preferred activity, right back to a high, and then you start making the demands or the task, you add amount or difficulty to it, and then you start working that way. So with a lot of our ODD kids, that's what we do. So something to think about as well. Choice of tasks. Choice empowers us, doesn't it? If somebody cuts off your choice, it's like, nope, you can only go to one taco stand in Tucson. No way. Okay, so, it's like, okay, no, I'm going to go to a lot of them. So that's what I do. So, but if you cut off my choice, I'm going to be mad. And so it's interesting. Some kids, really oppositional defiant kids, I'll put 2 worksheets out. One of them it's the same dang worksheet, and one of them has a cartoon on it, and one of them doesn't. Guess what they do? Right? I'll do that one. Okay. So good. It's choice, right? It's choice. So it can, there's a lot of things that can work in that way too. Non-contingent breaks. This is kind of an interesting area too. It's like, they're working really hard, just getting oh, hey, nice work. I love how you're working. Why don't you take a break? And they're like, what? Okay, cool. I'll come right back. Yeah. Okay, good. And it's really interesting. So you put it on a fixed time schedule. Every so often, they just get breaks. So there's pros and cons to that one. Okay, and then functional communication training is always kind of your basic go-to for me. Is can they request a break depending on their their modality of communication as well. Will they just tell you, hey, can I have a break, please? Or do they need a card? Do they need a sign? Are they using the AAC device or whatever it may be? Help if it's truly difficulty. You're really reinforcing communication. That's what we're looking for. And what we know about communication, right, it can replace the problem behavior if it's functional, if you know the function. So, for example, well, let's jump to the tangibles. So some of the kids that I work with over in children's clinics too, their iPad is like right here. It's like they've grown an arm into it or something. It's just like you can't get it away from them. And so basically, I will, pull it away, and they have a switch, a micro switch that says, iPad, please. And we'll kind of start pulling it away, and I'm like, oh, hit the button. Oh, iPad, please. Okay, they get it back. So they start tolerating that, and we start getting, getting more flexibility. And so pretty soon they're like, okay, yep, give me, yeah, thanks, okay. And they start handing it over, and then they start requesting it again, and I'm like, oh, that was awesome asking. Thank you for asking, but you got to wait for 2 seconds. Listen for that timer. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, now you can have it back. So you're building tolerance, really, right? Psychological flexibility in the ACT world, right? So thinking about that, it's like, whoa, okay, we can do this. And pretty soon they're waiting, and they say, give me. They're waiting for 5 to 10 minutes, and it's good. And so we do fake phone calls too for attention. It's kind of fun. Okay, this is something that one of our doc students is actually doing her dissertation on. It's kind of fun. Okay, this is the best choice card. If you guys want one of these, I'll give them to you. But we've been working with these for the last few years, and they've been working really well for homework. So these are really promoting problem solving, all right? So a lot of times our loving teachers and parents, they're force feeding. It's like, what do you got to get? You got to get through this homework. What do you need here? Okay, how about this? Do you need a snack? And we try to, because we care, right? We try to figure things out for them. this is, I ask parents to step back. I say, you know what? Let them problem solve that. Okay, look at your choices, and I'll go through each one with in situ, right? For each child. Wow, I'm going to give them like a stack of 10 books, and you got to read those now. Okay, if you recognize that it's too much, the amount, you can ask, hey, can you break this down into smaller parts for me? Because then maybe I can do it. Maybe I can just do the first row? Yeah, perfect, right? But let's get them to problem solve it. Second one, right? I just want attention. So kids don't always want help. If it's difficult, yes, they might ask for help. But otherwise, a lot of times our kids just want teacher, aide, or parent just to sit next to them. I just want you to hang out with me because I like you. You can be on your phone, that's okay. And so others is like giving choice for waiting, truly taking a break and then coming back, those kind of things. But just placing that best choice card. It's like, hey, what's your best choice? I know you're going to blow right now. You're going to flip the table. Why don't you look at what you can do and ask? It'd be way better. So we've been using these best choice cards for a while, and we get some pretty good results with them too. So something to think about as we're trying to get through challenging behavior related to escape, right? With the escape function. So, okay. All right, there are tons more, guys. I'm going to jump right to, oh, this is a good one. Tangible items are tough ones, right? There's so many different tangible items. You know, some of them that you can't have right now, but you got to wait for like up to 60 minutes. Other ones things you got to wait for hours and weeks. And then others that are just like, yeah, you can't have that. It's just not an option. Like knives, plastic bags are going to Disneyland right now. So those kind of things too, right? And so there are a ton of different things as well. And these are going to be in your PowerPoints. The automatic function is really interesting and different too. So read through this one. This is interesting. There's some new research out looking at why self-injury occurs, and there's 3 subtypes, which is fascinating. One, the self-injury happens, it's observed often when the individual is alone, right? But less so when people are around, okay? So these are kids that I get that eye gouge, and some of the trichotillomania kids too. It's just like when they're alone, they'll pull, skin pick, headbang as well. Then you have others that are self-injurious behavior. It's observed across all settings and contexts. They'll do it whenever, all the time. And this is stereotypy sometimes too. If it ends up in self-injury. I have this one guy who just keeps hitting his knuckles with Legos. And he has like calluses built up over years. It's kind of interesting, but he loves the input right there and only in one spot. I'm like, okay. And subtype 3 is actually self-injurious behavior is observed and they use self-restraint. So I have a couple of kids right now too, and they might wrap themselves up so they don't do it. They'll sit on their own hands so they don't engage in self-injury. It's kind of interesting. So they really started teasing out these 3 different subtypes of self-injury. So you can kind of look at some of those articles as well. It's really different and fascinating. So, but there are some basic strategies for that as well. But I often takes a lot more to analyze those. So, but anyhow, okay. Sorry, I will send all this to you. I hope this is some things that are helpful or just have you think about new things or different things. If you're doing some of these things already, awesome. And, but if you ever, want to contact me, I'm a resource in the community. And I do some telehealth on the side, and I actually go to homes if it's real severe as well. So that is a company that I work with too, is telehealth behavioral consultation services too. So, yes. Oh, for which one? Oh, for telehealth. So right now it's United Behavioral Health, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and out of pocket. So yeah. What's that? I can talk to you about that later for sure. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So.
About the Mind Clinic?
Oh.
Are you part of the Mind Clinic?
I'm not.
Oh.
No, it's something else. So.
Free services.
Yeah. Oh.
Anyway.
Nice. Nice. So.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you to Dr.